What did I do?
This is the last moment for Chief Donald Santorin Salvador. On April 1st, 2026, at the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center in downtown Los Angeles, California, 44-year-old Donald Santorin Salvador, the former chief of police for the California Department of State Hospitals at Metropolitan State Hospital in Norwalk, stood before a judge and pleaded not guilty to one felony count of grand theft. Alongside him in that same case file was 52-year-old Daniel James Beauregard, a former hospital police officer under Salvador's command, who was charged with the same crime and scheduled to be arraigned at a later date. The two men were accused of running a coordinated timecard fraud scheme that prosecutors say diverted more than $40,000 in taxpayer money away from a psychiatric hospital that houses some of the most vulnerable and dangerous patients in the state of California. The announcement came from Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan J. Hochman, who stood at a podium and described the case in terms that left no room for ambiguity. He said, "We will prove this was a coordinated, deliberate scheme between a police chief and his officer to take taxpayer money for work that was never done. This former police chief and officer clocked in for work. Little did we know they would allegedly be working for their own private business and not the people of California. They collected government paychecks while conducting their own side hustle. That's not public service. It's the betrayal of the public's trust, and we will hold them accountable in court." To understand the full weight of what these men are accused of doing, you have to understand where they worked and who they were supposed to be protecting. Metropolitan State Hospital sits on a 126-acre campus in the city of Norwalk, in southeastern Los Angeles County. It first opened its doors in 1916. For more than a century, the facility has served as one of California's primary institutions for the treatment of adults with severe mental illness. The hospital is one of 5 operated by the California Department of State Hospitals, along with Atascadero, Coalinga, Napa, and Patton. Metropolitan is licensed to operate up to approximately 1,418 beds. As of the most recent fiscal year, its maximum capacity was 1,374 beds, with 826 currently active. The facility employs approximately 1,530 people across roughly 190 different job classifications. The patients at Metropolitan are not there voluntarily. The hospital does not accept voluntary admissions. Its patient population includes individuals who have been found incompetent to stand trial, individuals committed under California's Lanterman-Petrus Short Act because they are a danger to themselves or others, and patients in a fully licensed skilled nursing facility who require round-the-clock medical care. Due to community safety concerns, Metropolitan does not accept patients whose criminal histories include murder, sex crimes, or escape. But the patients it does accept are, by the very nature of their legal status, people who suffer from the most severe forms of mental illness. They include individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and other conditions so debilitating that the state has determined they cannot manage their own lives. The people responsible for maintaining safety and security inside that facility are the hospital police officers. The Department of State Hospitals operates its own law enforcement division. Hospital police officers provide safety, service, and security to patients, employees, and the public in and around each hospital. They patrol the grounds. They respond to incidents. They manage crises involving patients in acute psychiatric distress. They are the first line of defense when a situation turns violent, and at a facility like Metropolitan, that happens more often than most people realize. In 2011, National Public Radio reported that staff members at Metropolitan were attacked by patients more than 1,300 times in a single year. The Los Angeles Times reported in 2005 that 73 allegations of abuse had been filed at Metropolitan in the preceding 3 years, far more than at any other state hospital in California. A Department of Justice investigation in 2002 found systemic problems at the facility, including failures to protect patients from harm and failures to provide adequate treatment. The California Office of Law Enforcement Support, which provides independent oversight of the Department of State Hospitals police force, publishes semi-annual reports documenting incidents of misconduct, use of force, patient assaults, and policy violations at all 5 hospitals. This is the environment where Donald Santorin Salvador was appointed to lead the police department. He was sworn in as Chief of Police at Metropolitan State Hospital on August 22, 2022. The city of Norwalk documented the occasion with a photograph. Salvador, a resident of Lake Forest in Orange County, took command of the law enforcement division at a facility that handles some of the most dangerous and unstable individuals in the state. And according to prosecutors, within 3 months of his swearing in, the scheme began. From November of 2022 through April of 2023, Salvador and Danielle James Beauregard, a 52-year-old hospital police officer living in Northridge, are accused of scheming to submit time cards for hours that Beauregard did not spend performing his police duties at the hospital. Instead, prosecutors allege Beauregard spent that time working on projects for a private company owned by Salvador called Daily Strategic Group, LC. Daily Strategic Group is a security consulting company. California business records show it was incorporated on May 4, 2020, in Lake Forest, 2 years before Salvador became police chief at Metropolitan. The company maintained an Instagram page describing itself as a professional consulting firm. The implication is straightforward. Salvador was running a private security business on the side, and prosecutors say he used a state employee, an officer under his direct command, to do the work, while that officer continued to collect his full government salary for shifts he was not actually working. According to the criminal complaint filed by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, Salvador assigned Beauregard to serve in a role described as special assistant. That position was supposed to involve helping with media relations tied to state hospital police operations. On paper, it sounded like a legitimate assignment. In practice, investigators say, Beauregard produced little substantive work in that role. Instead, the allegation is that he spent the majority of his time during those months performing tasks for Daily Strategic Group, Salvador's private company, while clocking in as a state hospital police officer. During that same period, Beauregard allegedly collected regular wages and overtime pay from the state of California for hours he did not work as a hospital police officer, and Salvador, as his commanding officer and the chief of the entire police department, allegedly knew about and allowed the arrangement. He was the one who assigned Beauregard to the special assistant role. He was the one who owned the private business. He was the one who signed off on the time cards. The estimated loss to the state of California exceeded $40,000, according to the district attorney's office. However, the criminal complaint itself places the total at more than $50,000 when wages and overtime are combined. Think about that number for a moment, $50,000. That is taxpayer money. That is money drawn from the budget of a state psychiatric hospital, a hospital that treats patients who cannot care for themselves, a hospital that employs psychiatric technicians, registered nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and rehabilitation therapists, a hospital that has historically struggled with staffing shortages and violence against its own employees. Every dollar paid to an officer who was not doing his job was a dollar that could have gone toward the care and safety of some of the most vulnerable people in the state. And it was not just the money. Consider the security implications. Beauregard was a hospital police officer at a facility that houses mentally ill patients committed through the criminal justice system. His job was to maintain safety and security for patients, staff, and the surrounding community. If he was spending his shifts working on a private security consulting business instead of performing his duties, that means there was one fewer officer providing protection during those hours. One fewer officer to respond to a psychiatric emergency. One fewer officer to intervene if a patient became violent. One fewer officer to patrol the grounds of a 126-acre open campus that sits in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Metropolitan State Hospital is not a locked-down prison. It is an open campus within a security perimeter. The city of Norwalk surrounds it. Approximately 80 of the hospital's own employees live within the city. The facility is the second largest employer in Norwalk, behind only the Unified School District. The community depends on the hospital's police force to maintain the security boundary between a psychiatric facility and the surrounding neighborhoods. When an officer on that police force is allegedly not performing his duties because he is working on his boss's private business, that is not just a payroll issue. That is a potential safety failure. The case was investigated by the Office of Law Enforcement Support of the California Health and Human Services Agency. OLS is the independent oversight body responsible for investigating allegations of serious misconduct by law enforcement personnel within the Department of State hospitals. Its investigators examine policy violations, procedural failures, and criminal conduct by hospital police officers and their supervisors. OLS has the authority to access all facility areas and grounds to conduct its investigations. The prosecution is being handled by the Public Integrity Division of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Deputy District Attorney Stefan Marakic is assigned to the case. The Public Integrity Division handles cases involving corruption, fraud, and misconduct by public officials and government employees. The fact that this case was routed through that division, rather than a general fraud unit, reflects the nature of the allegation. This was not simply an employee padding his hours. This was a police chief allegedly using his position of authority to direct a subordinate officer to work on the chief's private business while billing the state for the officer's time. Salvador pleaded not guilty at his arraignment on April 1st, 2026, in Department 30 of the Foltz Criminal Justice Center. He was released on his own recognizance and ordered to comply with all laws and court-ordered conditions. A preliminary hearing is expected to be scheduled for June 8th. Beauregard is set to be arraigned at a later date. If convicted as charged, each man faces up to 3 years in state prison to be served in county jail. 3 years may not sound like a long sentence for a scheme involving tens of thousands of dollars in stolen public funds, but the consequences extend far beyond the courtroom. Salvador's career in law enforcement is effectively over. He is a former police chief who has been charged with a felony for stealing from the state he was sworn to serve. Beauregard is a former police officer accused of collecting pay for work he never did. Both men, if convicted, would carry felony records for the rest of their lives. And the broader implications reach even further. The California Department of State Hospitals is responsible for the care and security of thousands of patients across 5 facilities statewide. The department's police force is entrusted with maintaining order inside environments that are inherently volatile. When a police chief at one of those hospitals is charged with using his position to run a side business on the state's dime, it undermines public confidence in the entire system. It raises questions about oversight, accountability, and how long the scheme might have continued if investigators had not uncovered it. Timecard fraud in government is not a new phenomenon. A 2020 report by the Government Accountability Office found that 22 out of 24 federal agencies it surveyed had compiled data on time and attendance misconduct and fraud among their employees. A Department of Defense case study documented 3 DoD employees who pleaded guilty to defrauding the federal government of more than $35,000 each in falsely claimed overtime. The California State Auditor has investigated multiple cases of payroll fraud in state agencies, documenting patterns where employees fabricate hours, have coworkers clock in on their behalf, or use their positions to avoid detection. What makes the Metropolitan State Hospital case different is not the dollar amount. $40,000 to $50,000 is not the largest time card fraud case in California history. What makes it different is the setting and the people who were put at risk. This was not an office worker padding hours at a desk job. This was a police officer at a psychiatric hospital who was allegedly not performing his security duties while patients with severe mental illness were in his care. And it was a police chief who allegedly orchestrated the entire arrangement to benefit his own private business. The district attorney's statement captured the essence of the allegation. They clocked in for work. They collected government paychecks. But they were not working for the people of California. They were working for themselves. On that campus in Norwalk, a facility that has stood for more than 110 years, where patients who cannot care for themselves are housed behind a security perimeter in the middle of a residential community, the people responsible for keeping everyone safe allegedly had other priorities. Projects for a private consulting firm, time cards for hours that were never worked, paychecks for duties that were never performed. Metropolitan State Hospital opened in 1916 as a self-sufficient facility with its own farm, dairy, and animals. Today, more than a century later, the campus is undergoing a $65 million renovation funded by Proposition 1 to convert 6 vacant state-owned buildings into a mental health care village with over 150 new beds and supportive housing units. The state is investing in the future of that facility. At the same time, prosecutors say, the man who was supposed to be running its police department was investing in his own private business. Donald Santarin Salvador was 42 years old when he was sworn in as chief of police at Metropolitan State Hospital. He was 44 when he was arraigned on a felony charge. Daniel James Beauregard was 50 when the alleged scheme began. He was 52 when the charges were filed. As of this recording, both men have been charged with 1 count each of felony grand theft. Both are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Salvador's preliminary hearing is expected to take place on or around June 8, 2026. Beauregard's arraignment date has not yet been set. The case number is 26-CJCF-01967, filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court. District Attorney Nathan Hochman had one final message. He said, "That's not public service. It's the betrayal of the public's trust." At a hospital built to care for people who cannot care for themselves, the officers who were supposed to keep them safe allegedly could not keep themselves honest.